further ado, I would like to invite the Prime Minister to open the gold final of the Theology Open by delivering a speech not exceeding 7 minutes and 15 seconds in length. Also, would one of the panel fancy doing timings? Thank you, Jarrod.
I love engaging in the final. It's my most hated position, but it's fine. Yeah, thanks, Shaurya, for debating with me. Thank you all for the final. With that said, 3, 2, 1. Oops, my timer didn't start. Yikes. 3, 2, 1. Firstly, framing on what the rationalist community actively wants. I think the most important thing to recognize within this debate is that rituals in and of themselves do not imply any form of divinity, that they do not imply any form of actual religious connection. That is to say, that rituals are often undertaken in various ways. And I want to be very explicit about this. That is to say, that rituals are often underdone as a form of cultural pride, and they are often undertaken as a form of festivalistic celebration. So things like Halloween exist, which are literally unreligious. Things like Thanksgiving exist, which are literally unreligious and often meant to celebrate things like harvests. We think in most instances, religion and culture are absolutely separated, which means often your rituals that aren't directly absolved with praying to the divine are often relatively cultural. That is to say, that they often look like festivals being celebrated at the winter solstice, or like things like Basant in Karachi, which often mean that you're going to have these kinds of festivals and ritualistic festivals that enable community to bond in terms of countries and other things. Those are the kinds of rituals that I think the rationalistic community probably ends up supporting. Now onto what the rationalist community actively wants. And I think there's two things that are crucial with what the rationalistic community cares about. The first thing to say is that I think the rationalistic community uniquely, okay, actually clarification, let's go for it.
Yeah, so I just want to be clear. In your opinion, what does it add to the debate that these rituals are called religious?
I don't think that we have to support these religious rituals being called religious. They can literally be called rationalistic rituals, right? Basically, all we're saying is that they probably look like regular rituals, things like celebrations that you don't have to necessarily label them religions. You can religious rituals, you can call them rationalistic rituals, and the rationalistic community will do them together. I don't really care that you have to say that they're particularly religious, right? I don't think that's a burden that we have to necessarily take and say that they're religious. Okay, the second thing that I want to talk about then is just on like what the rationalist community actively wanted. And I want to note 3 broad things about this. The first thing to note is that I think like you want community with others. Second, and I want to be very clear, I think these people don't necessarily hate religion or everything within it. They often just believe that religion is not unilaterally justified, i.e. they want some of the benefits that religion provides in terms of community, but necessarily don't want the massive unaccountability that comes along with it. The third thing to say is that I want to be very clear. They often want to prove that their system of life is better than that of a religious person, which means they often have to adopt certain things from that structure in order to access the best possible benefits. First argument then is on how this generates significantly deeper connections and how these are ways to connect. There is no faith-based reasoning necessarily directly behind them. And I want to note 4 things here. The first thing to say is that I think religious rituals and festivals often allow significant amounts of community bonding. It means that you often come together to celebrate things, to talk about things that are very similar between you. Second, it means that you often generate significantly deeper bonds. You're literally celebrating the exact same cultural context. You're often celebrating the exact same thing together, which means in most instances, you're just likely to feel similar and like-minded to these kinds of individuals. Thirdly, we think it means that you're often going to celebrate things like food and community. It means that you often want to live in a place where there are significantly more people communally around you. This means that you're just likely to have individuals who believe in similar things around you in the first place. But second, it means you interact with like-minded people a lot more. This uniquely is a tipping point to things like community. Note for 3 reasons. First, I think it often means that you interact significantly more within the entire communal space. Second, I think it means that it's likely to be significantly more fun for you to interact in the community. That is to say that you actively get to know the people outside the scope of rationalism, but rather it's individuals in the first place. Thirdly, though, I think it adds a sense of community at the point where you're undertaking certain rituals together. That is to say that when you have a common experience of sitting together every winter solstice and having this tradition of telling your stories, I think it often means that you're just likely to connect together to a significantly deeper level. You often have significantly joined experiences that are very different from the counterfactual on opposition, where you cannot have these kinds of experiences. You cannot have those within particular ways. Okay, second piece of then argumentation. And I want to be very clear here, right? I think that in most most instances, the subjective realm in a rational fashion is just conducting philosophy, right? When we explore this. And I want to talk about 3 to 4 things here. Firstly, I just want to be clear. Most people are formally religious, and if they aren't, they feel like there's a whole lot more regarding the subjective questions of life. The problem is not that they believe that there doesn't exist a divine or that there doesn't exist something, but rather they believe that the religion gives illegitimate answers to these. That is to say that they often tend to think that the religion takes the easy way out, saying that there's particular types of cards and saying that the divine cards is like particularly means that we have these ways. Thirdly, though, why is this then a particular way to engage with the spiritual realm in particular? Well, firstly, I think it just means that you have great answers to moral questions and create an alternative to religion that provides God is not required for communal bonding and a personal social life. Secondarily, this lets you directly engage with the idea of connection that religious people often believe that is integral to their lives. Why is this really, really important? 3 things to say. Firstly, I think it often means that you're just likely to explore things like philosophy to a significantly larger degree. It means that you're likely to look into particular types of things that matter to the average individual to a much larger degree on our side of the house. Last argument then, this is going to be about why this is a mockery of religion and should actively be appreciated in that way as well. Firstly, I think it means that you often blatantly demonstrate why religious rituals in and of themselves do not carry any direct weight. 3 ways this is done. Firstly, I think it means that you're literally copycatting religious rituals. It means that you're able to like literally say, we're able to do the same things. You can generate similar value from them, even without having interference with the divine. This is a direct question mark to the value that the extra divine element necessarily adds. 3 ways this materializes. Firstly, I think it often means that you're able to get access to the communal benefits that these religious rituals provide. Second, you're often able to access things like being able to say that access like English for this, you're often able to access what we call satisfiability through rituals. That is, you often feel significantly more content at heart at the point where you undertake certain types of traditions. Thirdly, though, I think it often means that you're just able to combine the religious and spiritual aspects of your life. That is to say that in many instances, religion is a way of communal bonding, like we already talked about. At that point, we just think you're likely to experience these kinds of things as well. Why is this really, really important? Firstly, it clarifies exactly why religion is an unnecessary part of the human experience. That is to say that when you're literally able to say that we're able to access the benefits based on things like religious rituals without actively accessing interference of the divine, it means you're just much more likely to feel like you can co-opt religious benefits within our world. But second, and I want to be very clear, I think you're just able to access significantly more agency in our world. The ability to do things that you necessarily want to do, the ability to express yourself in ritualistic ways are often things that humans tend to do in most instances. That is to say that I like embracing myself in festivals. I like going out with friends. I like doing things that necessarily improve my agency in and of itself. At that point, I just think that it's probably fair to say that the increase in agency that we access through individuals necessarily being able to conduct rituals that they want to, being able to do things that they're able to access, I think it means that you just likely get better access to that things on our side of the house. Very proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for that speech and invite the Leader of Opposition to continue.
Okay, wonderful. I hope that I am audible. Please POI exclusively in the chat. Don't unmute yourself. That scares me. I'm going to be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. 2 things in my speech. Number 1, why this is principally wrong to do something which so strongly goes against your religious doctrine. Number 2, people will think that you're wacky cuckoo and this is not good for your religion that likes to be rational. First of all, a little bit about rebuttal. Opening government doesn't prove to us why you need to have rituals. If you want to be in a community, if you want to discuss nice, lovely things, we believe that this religion should start a fucking debate club. I think all of the things that opening government wants to be achieving, you can also achieve in a debate club without having all of the dangers that we are talking about. So we are unclear what opening government achieves. But second of all, like even if they are true that this needs to be a ritual, why the fuck do these ritual needs to rise? Like why can't like the local communities of this religion just light a candle by themselves? Like why is it so important that there's this major rise which probably will be publicized, but probably people will read about your religion within this situation? We believe that you should start your debate club and that you should light your candle on your own instead of doing it in such a ritualistic ritualistic way within the decision. Go now into my actual speech, why this is principally going against everything that you stand for within this religion, and that is bad. So basically your doctrine is what makes you up as a religion, that defines you, that is basically the reason of why you're meeting together. So your doctrine is kind of the thing that you really do care about, because if you don't have your doctrine, you have very little, especially as a small religion and a newer religion within the situation. So you kind of want to follow this stuff. So what does your religion stand for? It stands for rational thought, it stands for neutrality, it stands for empirical evidence, whatever that info slide said. It was very long and very confusing. Why does it go against this so massively? Number one, prayer doesn't necessarily work. Maybe it works if you believe into it, but it doesn't objectively work. There's no empirical evidence that prayer works, that you do something and meet and light a candle and all of these kind of things is nice and it's fun, but there's no empirical evidence that this is happening in this degree. Second of all, rituals, and specifically hoping that by doing all of these ritual things, something will change, actively goes against neutrality. It is not neutral to ask the universe and the world that something is going to be getting better for you within this situation, because the second that you ask and hope that something changes, and the second that the world actually gives that to you, the world is not neutral anymore within the situation, directly going against your whole idea about neutrality. It doesn't matter that there is not a God in your belief. We don't care whether or not there's a God on government side. It matters that you ask the universe, the world, and whatever for some change, that you believe that lighting a candle changes something, not neutral anymore. Third of all, there's no empirical evidence that lighting a candle is useful in any degree within the situation. So you're doing a lot of just different things that you cannot be proving within the situation. But then fourth of all, also sitting around and blowing out a candle is not very utilitarian of you. This is a big part of your religion, that you believe that you can change things and make things better. Blowing out the candle, not sure how this is actually making things better. Why is it a bad idea that you go against something that you're religious against your religious doctrine so much? Number one, it's a purpose of why it starts to corrode. The idea what you stand for starts to corrode. It starts with something very small, with the rituals like this, but specifically when it's on the rise of. When your religion becomes more and more about these things, less about trying to change the things that you do not like about the world and you think are unfair, more about this whole idea about rituals and talking about the idea about this instead of doing this idea, your religion doesn't become pure anymore. Closing government, what's your extension?
You are aware that these people, being rationalists, as the info slide says, are literally not praying to the universe or sitting around and discussing why the planets are the way they are.
That's what opening government said, that you're sitting around and talking about why the things are the way they are. But second of all, first of all, it goes against everything that you stand for. But second of all, people will think that you're wacky cuckoo. This answered your question probably. Number one, people that might want to be joining your religion, and this is very important. Why do religions care that people join you? Well, you can only exist if you have members. So you kind of want more people to join, so that you can have more influence, specifically in a religion that cares so much about utilitarian change. You do care more about having more people, so then you can do more people. Why? What is the appeal of your religion specifically? Number one, it does not force you to believe in a higher being. It doesn't force you to believe that into something that is not there. Is it a God? Is it something the world can change? Is it that lighting a candle solves anything? Second of all, it specifically is focused on graspable things that are possible to be proven. You want all of these good things to be happening within. You want to know what the things are happening. And third of all, you specifically do not do all of this prayer stuff. It is important for you as a religion to offer something different to any other religions. There are already a lot of religions that do rituals, that meet in places and talk about the things that they believe in. That is called church. Now, all of these kind of different things are already things that other people offer. But you have this interesting things that you offer, which is about being objective, not believing into talking about all of these things instead of doing these things, being rational, doing only things about empirical evidence. So this changes these things. So who are these people that want to join you? We believe that it is, number one, people that do not like traditional religions, that are fed up with having to pray instead of doing stuff, that are fed up with having to deal with things that are not empirical evidence. And what is important here to note, it doesn't matter whether or not you actually do pray in these situations. What matters is that people think that you do. Because what was Jess's first reaction to that info slide? These people are weird and they're probably jumping around a fire in the woods. This is the thing that people unfortunately connect to winter solstice and ritual religious prayers. There is the conception within society that if you believe in winter solstice, you believe in magic and crazy people and witches and all of these things. It is not correct, but this is what society thinks, and we think that we are relatively smart in opening opposition, and this is what both of us thought within into this situation. But this is the important thing here. The people that you would want to join your religion because of the things that said, are the people that don't want this magical bullshit, but suddenly you're doing this magical bullshit. Cool. Why does society think that you're wacky cuckoo? Because you're suddenly doing all of these magical kind of shit within the situation. But given that your religion is so much based on objectivity, rational thinking, empirical evidence, you really do want to be perceived as rational. You don't want to be thrown into the same pot as those other religions that do celebrate the rituals and celebrate the winter solstice and believes in all of these kind of magical things. You don't want to be like them because you are not like them. Why do you not want this? Number one, less people will join you for the reasons I just explained. Number two, you want to be respected, and being something that people make jokes about is not something that is respected. But third of all, you want to have the control over the narrative. The minute that you are participating in something that people have preformed pictures about, you lose the control over this narrative because the narrative gets crowded into this. What this means is that you have less people, that you can change less things because you are seen as whack within this situation. This religion should start a debate club, not rituals. We'll back you to oppose.
I'd like to thank the Leader of Opposition for that speech. Invite the Deputy Prime Minister to continue.
Am I clearly audible?
Not clearly. Could you move any closer?
Is this any clearer? Am I any better now?
Yeah, that's probably as good as it's gonna get.
Yeah, sorry. My mic really doesn't like me. Okay. Give me a second. Starting my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. Singing songs, eating food, lighting candles is not necessarily a prayer ritual. It is my birthday party from a few months ago. You don't necessarily have to pray in crazy cuckoo things to have a ritual occur, right? You don't have to have extremely faithful things occur. But even if you were to argue that this will turn out to be very crazy cuckoo, it'll turn out to be faithful, it'll turn out to be very irrational. First of all, literally our closing government was so frustrated with this nonsense that they POI'd you and told you these people are rationalists, why in the world would they engage in these type of rituals? But second of all, if you are a rationalist community, one of the major tenets behind your conception is the idea that religion is not reasonable. Religion does not have an empirical basis. Religion is wrong, factually. At that point, why would you be the crazy cuckoo like church in the side of opening opposition and not the church of the flying spaghetti monster, a mockery, a satire that mocks religion, points out how its rituals are completely arbitrary, come from like unnecessary bases, and you can do it even better, but you don't need a magical scripture or an actually crazy cuckoo ritual, right? First of all, let's look at what O has given us, because all of it is on this mischaracterization of our case, but I'm sure Jess is smart enough to spin it into a win, so I'll try to address it anyway, right? So first of all, this idea of how, hey, look, if you have like a principled right to be rational, then you cannot do anything that is not rational, right? So first of all, they claim that rationality and reason doesn't work with faith. Note that this does not apply when you are mocking faith by doing things that are not based on faith, right? You're literally talking about things that are based on what you wish the world would be like, perhaps, or maybe your viewpoints on empirical facts, right? Like what kind of policies you might want to see, what kind of ways you might want people to behave, right? Necessarily, these discussions actually completely oppose the idea of religious discussions. Why is this the case? It's because religious discussions often focus on scripture, on the idea of theology, discussing the reasoning that, say, Christ gave you, or say the Gita gives you, or the Quran gives you, and then using that to come to conclusions. This is a direct opposition to that. because it tells you that as a community, you come to conclusions on moral questions based on reason and rationality. Second of all, they tell you that you're going to take something that is just sort of like, asking for something from the universe, and thus you're implying the universe is a neutral. Again, why do we have to defend this? We don't. It's much more likely that you're going to talk about things in the universe that you want to be better, because, and then you wish you could do something about it, right? Like supporting certain policies, supporting certain actions, or more realistically, literally just talking about how you suffer because some people act a certain way, you wish they'd act a better way. It's literally just a bonding mechanism, right? Now, dealing with O, let's look at our case and then extend. So Muzi gives you a few points, right? First of all, Muzi tells you, look, religion is not something that we often have to oppose in every form. We just have to oppose its legitimacy if we're rationalists, right? A rationalist doesn't have to say that every ritual that makes people happy is evil and wrong, but he does have to say that it's based in complete, non-logical reason. At that point, if you convince someone that religion is irrational, their decision calculus is now, should I give up this social benefit for this rational benefit? And the problem is that to a large extent, people refuse to do this because they value tangible benefits more. At the point where a rationalist society gives you these tangible benefits as well, on the basis of rationalist discussion, you now have more buy-in from people who are within these religious communities. Note, this is not a large religion proselytizing to get a huge amount of followers. These are like small communities that have friends that they want to get involved into this. If you think that there should be a debate club, well, it's not that different. It's like a student organization or like a theology society where people get to have these discussions in the first place. But the second thing that Muki tells you is really important, right? Why exactly is this going to, for you as a rationalist community, create happiness and bonding, right? Because first of all, it gives you a chance to feel heard and be heard, right? By people around you. But second of all, it also lets you feel like open to like being open about your intimate issues, right? So this is literally a way for you to feel better. If opening up and opening up are both wrong and we wash everything in this debate, the benefit on our side is still higher, because even if there's no buy-in on either side, we still get that catharsis, that actual sense of feeling good on our side, right? Okay. Now for my extension, I'm going to tell you why exactly this is something that rationally should be the best course of action if you want to if you actually want to aim at whether religion is reasonable or not, right? Because here's the thing. Religion has long monopolized the field of whether human experience should be modeled in one way or another, right? Like the only way people often think about how they should live their life tends to be focused on philosophy and religion. And philosophy tends to stay within academic quarters, and religion tends to dominate the moral atmosphere. At the point where you enter this moral atmosphere in a rationalist way and then perform based on that rationalist atmosphere, you do a few things. First of all, you rationally explore the benefits that religion genuinely does provide. It is illogical to say that religion is logically illegitimate, but we don't know anything about its rituals and never look at whether its rituals are good or bad. You can't just argue that because something is irrational, its every impact is bad. So if you can prove that its impacts exist without those illogical reasonings, you are better at exploring morality rationally. But second of all, you have a duty to explore this rationally. Why? Because you are the rationalist society and you believe in improving people's lives. Before that, I'll take CO if I can.
Yeah, look, the rationalist community has meetups. I've been to some of them. The difference they see between their one religious ritual on the winter solstice and their meetups is what makes religious rituals unique from meetups. What is that thing?
That thing is that within religious rituals, you have a personal aspect as opposed to a meetup, which is more professional. There's not that much intimacy. There's not that much meaning. It's like, again, a birthday party versus a debate society meetup. We don't have to defend believing in magic. We don't have to defend believing in faith, right? Like that's not our burden here whatsoever. But what this does is that it takes the rationalist society's aim and pushes it to the extent that it deserves to be pushed to, which is that you believe that you should find the way that humans can live through a process of empiricism. Why not practice that process in a way that has succeeded in other religions, right? Why not look at that field by yourself? At the point where you stay away from exploring the idea of human experience simply because other religions are part of it, you are not fulfilling your duty whatsoever. I believe most people within the rationalist community would first of all enjoy these rituals. But second of all, be very interested in dynamically evolving them over the years and finding what works best, because that is the point of rationality. We're very proud to propose. Rip me after the yellow.
I'd like to thank the DPM for that speech and invite the Deputy Leader of Opposition to continue.
Cool. PY's in the chat. All right, I'm gonna start my speech. Oh fuck, it's 5 a.m. Christ. Okay. 3, 2, 1. I'm going to do 4 things in this speech. Firstly, I'm going to unpack more what the rise of these rituals will look like, because that is specifically the government's burden to defend, not just rituals as they exist right now, but what the rise of them will look like. Then I'm going to respond to opening government's case, and then I'm going to whip our material and explain why, even if you believe that this is somewhat compatible on a principled level, why you ought to be concerned about outcomes in this debate, and why specifically I think that this community will be concerned about outcomes in this debate. Firstly, let's unpack more what rituals and the rise of them would look like. Again, that is the government's specific burden in this debate, because if there is some benefit that they're getting in community right now, it is unclear why this next needs to exponentially grow. So what will the rise of rituals likely look like? We can only obviously speculate to some extent, but I would suggest that in general, when rituals tend to rise, they tend to be associated with a hierarchy or some prescription that follows. Why is this the case? Firstly, because pragmatically, when you have lots of rituals to contend with, necessarily it just makes it easier to have some structure around them. So that is why people tend to impose the ways that they tend to look like. And secondly, if we just follow history empirically, that is just how rituals tend to develop. People become experts on certain things. They then prescribe the way in which those rituals are enacted. The reason why I think this rise specifically will be antithetical is because the way in which that hierarchy will manifest will likely mean that people are told the ways in which they need to practice those rituals. And that imposition is likely to be antithetical to the aims of this community for 2 reasons. Firstly, I think just like free thinking, the ability to reach rational inquiry and to discover evidence that is best kind of for you is sort of implied in this motion, right? And the beliefs and the characterization that the info slide gives us. I think by therefore imposing a specific set of practices in this way is likely to go against this. But secondly, I just think you'd feel kind of a sense of ickiness in the sense that you just start to mirror religions which have rituals and practice them in a generally hierarchical, imposed way. And you'd probably feel a bit icky about that to the extent that you've seen religions inflict shit upon the world. Now, opening government's claim here is that you don't inherently dislike religions, you just don't believe in their spirituality. I would contest that. If you are someone that fundamentally believes in utilitarianism, rational inquiry, then religions often stand fundamentally against those things. They have often inflicted pain against the world, and they believe in spiritual concepts that you don't necessarily think like reflect rationalization. So the rise and the way in which this would likely to occur would probably be specifically wrong in this instance. Let's weigh that against what opening government brings us in this debate. They say 3 things. Firstly, community. Again, they do not show us any sort of exclusivity. You can get community through many means. Like we get community from doing nerd shit and discussing debates on a computer. This community could probably find a community through, for example, having good lecture discussions about topics of inquiry that are important to them. It is unclear why they have to do that through rituals specifically. But secondly, they don't show us why the current level of community that they get, as I've already said, is not sufficient because they exist now. The second claim that opening government make is that you get more exploration of rational ideas. Firstly, I just want to observe that I don't think opening government do the work here and make the link between how you get more exploration as a result of these rituals. But secondly, I just think that this actually detracts from these things. For example, I would just suggest that more structured discussion is probably more conducive than to like a ritual, which kind of has a bit of a tangential connection. Like then I have to make the link myself. That just seems like more work. And I'm going to give you an intuition pump here. What seems like it is more likely to reach, some sort of great empirical discovery, discussing a concept in a lecture theatre or sitting around and singing a song? I think probably the former. The third claim that opening government make finally is just that it shows that you don't need the religious aspect of ritual, and it's going to get people over from religious communities. Like this will just not happen for the intuitive reason that religions can point to the unique benefits and differences of religion that this community can still not offer you. Like, why do you think people go enter religions. It's because they want comfort. It's because they want like understanding and meaning. They want things like the afterlife. You cannot offer those things as a rationalist community just by being like, but we've got some community too. Like, no, that's not how it fucking works. So the conclusion of opening government's case is it's just not that really important in this debate. Before I continue on though, does closing government have a POI?
Have you ever considered the possibility that the usage of the name religious is a full-on parody rather than something that people use in all seriousness?
Well, if that is true, then you're contradicting your opening because they want to attract religious people. If you want to parody them, then you're probably not going to do that. But like, is this really what this community wants, to parody religions? Like, again, that would seem to distract from fundamental lines of inquiry, trying to reach, fundamental truths. Like, it also kind of sounds like dickhead behavior. Like, I think the rationalist community probably want to do better than parroting religions, right? Maybe they can critique them constructively and not make mockeries of them. That would seem to be a little bit more productive in this debate. Okay, I'm just going to quickly address the point about it being antithetical. Like, the government's main push here is just that, like, but they are rationalist, so they will do this in a rational way. Yeah, but like, they're not doing that right now because this stuff kind of sounds a bit batshit. But like, even people who are initially rational kind of drift. And like, again, our point wasn't that this is religious and you're trying to, I think you guys mischaracterize us there. We're not saying that this is religious and you're asking for the universe to give you something back. We're saying that there is no proven empirical benefit to this. This is not rational inquiry, therefore it is not the thing that your community stands behind. But even if you don't believe any of this, the point is we probably care about utilitarian outcomes to some extent. Why? One, you need to get buy-in, because if your movement presents a paper or a proposal or something to any government or any institution that you're trying to get buy-in from, if they think you are cuckoo, you're probably not going to get much, benefit from them. Secondly, though, you'll probably get the wrong kind of people because people might think that you're not, what you're presenting yourself to be. And like, they will think you're a bit cuckoo, right? Because the first fucking reaction I had to this is, this seems like some astrology bullshit. Like, I was so confused. Like, I just think people are going to have this intuitive reaction, as much as I'm sure Tim's going to come in and give us some beautiful characterization about how rational this can possibly be. And the reason why this is important is because even if you think it can be done rational, the point is it will not be perceived that way. And even if in theory it is compatible with what you want to do, this does not help you. You probably care about these broader outcomes far, far more than some tiny symmetric benefit about community. For all of those reasons, we are very proud to oppose.
I'd like to thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition for that speech, and indeed everybody for what was an excellent top half. Member of Government, whenever you're ready.
Okay, am I audible?
Yeah.
So, in that case, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. We're actually going to fulfill the burden on government bench. We are going to talk about the rise, how it looks, and why it's important. We're also going to explain that people are a lot simpler than top half believes them to be, and integrate a lot of rebuttal into that. First of all, I'm unsure why opening opposition, or closing opposition for that matter, believe that these people would ever seriously self-identify as religious. If these events are etiqueted as religious, this is done as a parody. This is done on the level of, oh, this is a religion, bro, you get it, we have a religion now. Why? For the very type of characterization that you get from Jess. Because you believe that actual religious organization that codifies scripture and dogmatism is something that limits people's free thought, is something that has led to the manipulation of levers of power all around the world and hurt people all around the world. You have these beliefs a priori set by both Jess and the info slide. This means that therefore, you're likely to get the moral kick out of the fact that you are aware that you have more epistemic access to the actual truth, and to actually realize that you're not being manipulated, and you can also parody the other people who are dumb enough to buy into religion and bullshit like that. Which means that this is not a way for you to actually do some kind of rain calling ritual. This is a way to codify an activity to make it novel and more fun for your friend. This is like when me and my friend in high school, we joke that we have a religion that bans mathematics, and now we can't do math tests because our religion bans mathematics. That's on this level, because a priori, You do not buy into the idea that religious organization is anything that's good because it limits your own beliefs as per the concession of opening opposition. Secondly, you do not have an aspiration to create a global rationalist community. These people are not writing scripture. They're not trying to codify dogma. They don't have presidents or things like that. They're fringe groups of friends who light candles and eat chips around a forest fire. They do not think this is going to become a global movement, nor do they think they're ever going to get some kind of power, which means that the reason they organize rituals is not to be consistent with a particular principle, nor would they want to do that. It's to increase the amount of fun and fulfillment that they get out of their everyday activities. However, the question then is, and this is a fair question to pose to opening government, but what is then the comparative? Why do these things need to rise? Why can't they just, meet around the campfire the way they do now? There are a number of ways in which this rise looks. First of all, now instead of me and my 5 friends going up to meet, we have events like Rationalist Solstice Balkans 2021, where we go to a shack somewhere in Bosnia-Herzegovina, we celebrate the solstice, but we also spend 5 days in a nearby town, going around pubs and drinking and, making connections with people. We have friends, maybe you meet your new girlfriend or boyfriend at that place, and this is an event that you will look forward to next year. Cities now have monthly or yearly events in pubs that have codified rituals like a particular dress code, or you blow out the candle. There's a particular part of the evening where you talk about a particular topic, but they also have things like keynote speakers, like pub quizzes, like regular events, which are not just friend meetups, but are actual parties with activities that seem nice and novel. Thirdly, probably activities on social media, Reddit debates, like we have an entire day devoted to debating about the nature of the universe, and this is how we celebrate the rationalist idea. It's a codified ritual. We have rules of debating. It's quite similar to debating we do today, which is in some way a ritual, right? Insofar as we have rules in which we do it, and we think that we celebrate the idea of exchange of argumentation, and so on and so forth. Why do we think this is incredibly important? Because at the end of the day, this provides people more access to fun in a number of ways. First of all, we see this is hugely more accessible. Insofar as probably have events on Facebook that talk about these things, insofar as it probably happens like in a pub, like the neighborhood next to you, or your friends may be members of the Facebook group and then they invite you and then see what it's all about. There's a lot more social events that you know about, that are accessible to you, and that you are aware that are happening, and therefore you may choose to access them if this is something that grinds your gears. Secondly, this is not limited by skill, because, for example, to join debating, you need to be able to be a good public speaker. You need to have wide public knowledge, especially if you want to achieve some kind of result. This is not limited by skill. You only need to profess to have a certain kind of belief, which is a very low barrier to entry. The comparative is when this is something that happens on a more regional level, or that happens on a more city level, when we have Facebook groups with hundreds of people, and these are activities where we have actually novel things you've never done before. It's dynamic, it seems fun, it's something you never experienced. There's a huge amount of people you've never met, and not just your friend group, which sometimes can grow stale, and you always have the same conversations, and you go to the same place for a beer, and it's nice to change things around a bit. When it's larger to that extent, this means that a larger amount of individuals are actually able to partake in this. And this is where the rise makes the activity more fun. And this is the comparative when Helena says, oh, but let's start a debate club. Yeah, but debating is not fun if you only have like Zoom practice every week on Tuesday and you never meet anyone else. You want to go to tournaments because you meet other people and square your skills off against them. This is something new, because before COVID, we didn't have tournaments every weekend. You would not travel all the time. And this is something you look forward to. And then you go to socials, you meet people you never met before. You hear arguments you've never heard before. This makes debate fun. If you consistently debate against the same speakers and you hear the same arguments, it's the exchange of the ideas you've heard all over again, and people quit debating. This is why during COVID, a lot of high school debaters have quit, because they can no longer meet their friends, because they no longer travel to international competitions, which is something that adds dynamism to their life. But lastly, if they want to claim that the comparative, if anyone wants to claim the comparative is about you caring about the principles of this belief and how you are able to get people to buy into these principles, we think we get more of that on our side of the house as well. But before I explain why that's true, I'll take Helena.
Getting drunk in a forest on a normal day makes you a lad. Getting drunk in a forest on winter solstice, lighting a candle makes you a wacky person. Be a lad, not a wack. Get drunk on a different day. Don't make it a ritual.
Yelling at a screen for no material benefit whatsoever in a time zone where it's 5 a.m. probably seems crazy. we still continue to do it because we enjoy it as a fun activity and we don't care what other people think. Also, a lot of you believe in astrology. Either everyone is crazy or people simply don't care if others around them have quirky beliefs as long as they find these people to be fun and interesting. I'm not sure why this is a big impact within this debate. But why do we think we're more open to other people? First of all, because as rationalists, you want to be open to criticism, right? And you want to retain the aura of moral superiority. So you're going to say things like, okay, people who disagree with us, they can come to our events, they can debate with us, we're going to talk to them, we're going to explain what this is all about, which means that potentially, given that you have to frame yourself as open to criticism, you're able to change someone's mind. But secondly, how are people ever going to get to know about rationalism? Reading is tiring and people don't do it anymore because internet. Videos are short and don't really explain things, but there's this group of people who actually goes around a campfire, you know, does marshmallows and they drink beers and they also talk about science and philosophy stuff. This sounds cool and new and it might break my routine of being in the house all the time. I'm gonna try this out. And the fact that it's novel and accessible leads more people with an open mind, because you're not gonna change people who are Catholics. They probably hate you and laugh at you like your grandma is, the bullshit you're doing, but grandma is like that all the time and grandma is uncomparative. But the people who have an open mind are probably going to come because they see the activity as novel. Therefore, it's a very low risk. This is never gonna become global. This is fun because you drink beers and meet people. If it rises, it's more accessible. OG doesn't talk about the rise, CG does. In the name of God, CG has won this debate.
I'd like to thank the member of government for that speech. Member of opposition, whenever you're ready.
Yeah, okay.
Ready?
Go. Put aside the fact that as a religious person, I entirely oppose the conception of a religious ritual coming from proposition that empties all content out of what a ritual is, out of what a religion is, and would call any interaction between any two people a religious ritual, as long as there's any level of intimacy or fun. Put that aside a second. From my knowledge of the rationalist community and the people there, this isn't how they view religious rituals. So we're going to start with some framing, right? We're going to talk about the one specific religious ritual in the rationalist community that has ever happened, the only one they've called it that, why they called it that, what was religious about it to them, why they don't call the other things religious, and what it would mean for them to have more religious rituals in their own eyes. We're then going to talk about why those rituals, as they define them, oppose their own beliefs in multiple different ways, such that they cannot accept them without denying their own beliefs. We'll have some rebuttal. I'll get to it in a minute. Before that, the framing. Because what is the Winter Solstice Festival? The Winter Solstice Festival isn't a bonfire. It isn't just sitting around singing songs, and it's certainly not a parody. It's a recognition that throughout history, we've been afraid of the dark. That in every generation, in every part of the world, in every religion, the sun started disappearing. And we didn't know whether it would ever return, that God was going to eat the world, that the sun would never be back, and the dark would last forever. And so the Jews lit candles in their house to ward away the dark. And the Christians brought a tree into their house to protect nature so that the sun being gone wouldn't mean that there were no more trees. It meant that the pagans celebrated the gods of light, of happiness, of warmth, of the hearth to ensure that they didn't lose that even in the dark. The Mayans sacrificed lives to the gods. The Egyptians worshiped the god of the sun. They were scared of the dark. The winter solstice recognizes that and says, we're not different than they are. We don't worship their gods. We don't believe in our higher powers, but we also are afraid of the dark. The dark is there. That's why they turned off the candle. They sat in the dark out of the recognition that the dark would still come every winter, but they lit the candles in the first place to remember that we can fight the dark and we can try to bring the light back. Right? It was a recognition that there are powers above humanity that we cannot change. The darkness comes, and it's your job to deal with it. That was what was religious to them, that something happens and you have to interact with it. You maybe can negotiate with it, probably not. You maybe can avoid it, almost certainly not, but you can try to remember what makes you and your community human relative to it. That is what made it religious in their eyes. When we talk about new religious rituals for them, we're talking about that. We're talking about funerals where they recognize the inevitability of death and chant the phrases against death or the fear of death that Eliezer Yudkowsky talks about. We're talking about rituals celebrating their creation and the respect they have for the potential futures through things like the singularity or AI. AI. They recognize the future. They hope for it. Yes, they pray for it, knowing that the prayer will achieve nothing, but the rituals are there. This is what proposition has to defend. The other crap is just parties. They have birthday parties. They have meetups. They have sex for the intimacy. That's not what we're talking about. Before I talk about what happens, let's give just a little bit of rebuttal, right? So Tin tells us, they're a parody? No, they aren't. It's literally not a parody. They didn't think of themselves as a parody. That's just a lie. Secondly, he tells us, I'm going to defend the burden of raising religious rituals by saying they're not really religious rituals, they're religious rituals. No, the wording of the MOFIN is the rise of the religious rituals. If you're not defending religious rituals, you're not defending your burden. And finally, and importantly, as context for the rest of this, it's important to note that rationalists not only expect to gain power, but they have gained power. What is it we're talking about? We're talking about different levels of power. We're talking about money through people like Peter Thiel, who's in the ear, who many rationalists have the ear of. We're talking about senior people in every single high-tech organization, in every single large high-tech company in the world. We're talking about the respect they garner for being serious scientists and prize winners, mathematicians and engineers. We're talking about tech, right? Some of them work at the biggest artificial intelligence firms in the world, hoping to develop an AI that can take over the world. They absolutely expect to gain power. Certainly, they expect to gain the influence of persuasion. Now let's talk about what the religious ritual is, right? Because a religious ritual at its core is that recognition. Often it's a sacrifice, right? I recognize the power, I sacrifice something to it. That's the olden days. In the current days, I just recognize. It's a prayer, it's a hope, it's a loaf of bread sent out to the sea, hoping against hope that the powers that be will send it back to me in the future. The recognition of a relationship with that power is what makes it a religious relationship, right? There is a power. That power is not me. That power is beyond me, and I'm interacting with that power. What does this mean? What does it entail? And why is it anathema to rationalists? One, recognition of us as human. Right? Recognition that we can't print out the dark, that we can't avoid death. Rationalists will not accept, should not accept that without accepting that they're not going to change the world the way they need to. A rationalist that goes to a funeral with a rationalist color, with a rationalist religious ritual, is accepting death. If you accept death, you're never going to end it. Two, before I move on to two, I'd like to take a point of information from opening government.
The problem with all of this is that I think most rationalists do not interact with religion the way you're talking about, even if they say that this is part of the dark and like we're going to have like these interactions. I just don't think they view things as extremely higher powers without things like evidence based on the characterization that is given within the info slide in and of itself.
You don't need evidence. You don't need much evidence to recognize that the sun goes away in the winter and it gets dark. That part's pretty simple. You don't need much evidence to know that most people die and there's nothing you can do about it. That's the recognition of the higher power. And this is important because this is the second part, right? They tell us that the rationalists cannot accept the anthropomorphization, whatever, of the universe of a higher power, that the universe does not care. But if you interact with the universe, then you anthropomorphize it. Then you think it cares, that you think it might do something, it might not do something. It's not about the prayer, which opening opposition tells us. It's not about you hoping that there'll be an answer to your prayer. It's just about there being something to interact with. You can't have a conversation with something that doesn't talk back. And if it talks back, it cares. And if it cares, then you think it matters, and you shouldn't think it matters. Third and finally, you accept that the world is as it is, and you become complacent. If you accept that the darkness comes, if you accept that that nature is nature, if you accept that the physics of the world are beyond you, that's a higher power. And you're not going and if you beyond your understanding, then that's a higher power. And if you don't deal with that, if you worship that through religious ritual, you're not a rationalist. We beg you to oppose.
I'd like to thank the member of opposition for that speech. Invite the government whip to close the government bench of this debate.
I suppose I can be heard.
Yeah, all good.
Grand. All right. Starting in 3, 2, 1. The most important things that we've brought to you from CG are twofold. Firstly, how does rise, what this rise looks like, and what are the effects of this rise? And two, how does a average rationalist, a person that is either already within the rationalist community or might consider joining or is just now becoming aware of it, looks at the point of this and how they perceive this as a whole. Right. Firstly, let's do some extraneous points of on CO. CO gives us a truly astonishingly intriguing view of what the Winter Solstice Festival might be, and I'm glad to have heard it. But it's cool that it has connotation. It's cool that it has meaning that Elijah has explained to us, right? But considering that this seems genuinely interesting, the backstory is only going to fill within the CG frame of model. This is genuinely fun, and this is genuinely interesting. It might just catch on. It might just be a fun thing for you and your friends to enjoy. Yes, it has a deeper meaning. Yes, it has an intrinsic value behind it. Even more so, it's likely going to be fun at the end. People are going to be treated first, and they're going to be entertained afterwards, right? It's going to start with the entire monologue that Elijah has just given us about what this means and why and how this is connected to religions and how this is a ritual of sorts, right? How this works, and it's going to slowly evolve into gathering around the campfire, sharing these ideas, giving input to these ideas, and expanding the rationalist community as a whole. When we talk about the rise of these being just like the Winter Solstice Festival, right? We don't agree with CO that it's going to be exactly like this. CO doesn't give a likelihood analysis. The rise of these rituals is going to be exactly like the Winter Solstice Festival. They can be less depressive. They can celebrate things other than, oh, the darkness will eventually consume us all. Because even though every winter the sun goes away, so every winter does Dinamo go away from the UEFA Champions League, and I would like a ritual to celebrate this, even if I do have to turn out a candle. Moving on. The points that we have talked about, right? This is generally, by the average rationalist, probably not going to be identified as a serious religion. This is probably not going to have the same connotation of appealing to the entirety of your livelihood, the entirety of your identity, drawing connotations for the afterlife and what's going to look like, right? In a sense, this is a parody. Dean might have came off as a bit of a meme, but what he has talked about is a genuine case that we are bringing you. It's somewhat satirical of the use of the term. It's somewhat satirical that you can use this term and co-opt the term from the religious groups that have taken it. You feel cool since you believe that you have more epistemic access to the truth because your beliefs can be rationally surmised and your beliefs have a rational chain of events that lead a causality chain that can be drawn back to and that can be explained. This is why you have the moral superiority. You feel that you have the correct path because it can be proven empirically to the best of our extent as people, right? And then you're co-opting something that is sacred from the intrinsic religion that has guided humanity for so long. This is where you draw this effect, right? This is where you draw this religious effect on this religious effect, and this is how you co-opt it and use it. It's not exclusively a parody. It's not exclusively making fun of saying, ha ha, you believe in a god, look at the idiots. It's saying we also can do these rituals. We can also do this, and we're going to do this for our beliefs. And secondly, the codifying part, right? Because you don't buy into the idea that religious organizations are a good thing, because you do believe that the religious agency, as O was nice to point out, right? Because you are codified, because it has certain rules and regulations about how they act. This is why you get this novelty part that we are bringing you. This is why we support the rise of it, something that OG is cleverly avoiding, right? The rise of it means that you have more events like these, events that are likely codified to some extent, events that are going to be novel and fun, and events are going to be, wow, this seems interesting. I do want to gather in a forest around the campfire, and I do want to turn off the last candle and sit in silence. This likely gives the average individual huge access, right? The huge access to an average individual, because nothing else can give this amount of access. Firstly, as Tin has explained, it's not delimited by outside factors, only by you saying that you subscribe to rationalism, or even that you don't subscribe to rationalism, but would like to see what's going on there. And secondly, it's not a party in the blanket state of the word, right? It's not just going to a party and getting drunk for the sake of it. It's going there with the intent of finding out what this is about, what rationalism is about. The goal of the rise would be that you don't need to read the info slide on a motion like this, that all of us have the knowledge that Elijah has when he talks about rationalism, right? This is the situation that we can bring about with the rise of such events because of their novelty and the huge access that an individual has. And furthermore, to touch upon OO, who kind of missed the point by saying, oh, you shouldn't pray because this principally doesn't work with rationalism. That's not the point. It's not the point that it doesn't principally agree with rationalism in its own right. The point is that it's something that rationalism can co-opt. You're not saying that a higher power controls your fate, but you are saying that you can co-opt the tradition of a ritual. On that,
Fun stuff sounds great, but unfortunately you guys have not done any weighing in this debate. Why is a bit more fun, which can also take place without a ritual, worth the expense of being seen as more crazy by governments, institutions, and the public, who you might need to achieve your utilitarian goals?
Okay, cool. Firstly, as we have talked about, the other things such as debate require you a certain amount of skill or a certain amount of delimiting factors that limit your ability to join this group. Secondly, because even if you are going to be seen in school for Cocoa Puffs, that's not kind of the point. The point is that the average person is most likely to see this seems like a fun factor. Thirdly, governments are probably not as likely to find you insane, and even though governments are probably not likely to have an opinion of you, as Sten has told about, this is likely not going to be the global movement that's going to achieve all of your utilitarian goals. This is likely going to stay at the level of sharing these ideas to people that might find this interesting. And even if people do think you're for Cocoa Puffs, it doesn't really matter. The point is that people are going to say, this is an interesting ritual. I have access to this. This sounds novel and interesting. And this is where they're going to get access to rationalist ideas. And this is why the rationalist community as a whole has benefits from this, because it can expand its ideas to other people. And furthermore, it gives you access to conjoining communities locally, semi-locally, Balkan rationalist gathering, come one, come all, and globally, because people are going to post this on Twitter and Reddit and Instagram. People are going to talk about it. For all of these reasons, we are proud to propose.
I'd like to thank the government whip for that speech, and I invite the opposition whip to close the debate. Woo!
Cool beans. All right, y'all can hear me. I have the little yellow box. Totally have all my papers just stacked. That's fine. 3, 2, 1. We accept that in religious movements, parties or whatever draw people in and attract people to join the movement. We think that is fine for Gov to claim. We think, on side opposition, this is not worth the trade-off of losing the purpose of the movement, the soul of the movement, and the ability to actively carry out the aims of the movement. Why do we care if 1,000 or 1,000,000 more people even are partying on the streets or are attending these rituals if what they are doing is not in the interest of the movement? We've never gotten any analysis from side government as to why having more people who are less dedicated to the movement as a whole is something that is desirable for the movement. Elijah explains to you why the movement already has a significant amount of power, but also is growing in momentum. If you want an intuition pump, because you've never heard of this, think of things like the EA movement, who are roughly similar and attract roughly similar people, but also is something that is growing significantly and getting a lot more traction without having parties. Okay, cool. I'm going to address this memeing case that came from both opening and closing government. Insofar as, they're not doing this seriously. We're just doing this to parody other people, right? The motion doesn't say irony, but and so then Tin asserts, the only reason a rationalist would do this is mockery. Like they do, as Elijah says, they do it because they want a way to be able to fit into society. They want to be able to perceive themselves as part of a larger fabric. When this is something that everyone does, this is how people are told that this is how people should do. This is how people should connect with the world around them. They do this for connection, not for religion, but to feel like they are part of the fabric of humanity. Cool. And then they go, and then again, like, even if what they're doing is memeing, even if I entirely accept this burden that, like, this characterization that Gov has said, people really understand nuance and irony for long periods of time? Because I'm not going to fucking lie. I started saying yeet and things like that ironically, and then I started saying them seriously. And I could not tell the difference at that point when it was something that I did so often, and it was just something that was a norm. I don't understand why either individuals who are now joining this movement or individuals who are doing this for a long period of time are going to understand that this is something that is ironic and memey and not something that is just part of the religion and the way we do it now. Then what we get from opening opposition beyond that is say, we're able to combine religion and ideology, but we think religion is bad as this specific movement. I'm so confused by this, right? Like, this means that we should prove religion is irrelevant by joining and being more like religions. Like, this line of logic for me personally just doesn't flow, and I really don't understand what exactly this is meant to achieve. Why then, though, does are we above opening opposition? Because opening opposition depicts religious, rationalistic, whatever, say it 3 times fast, I dare you, rituals in a specific way. We talk about things that are inherent to all rituals, regardless of the specific meaning types or regardless of exactly how that ritual is portrayed. It doesn't need to be dancing around a bonfire. It could be turning on and off the lights 3 times before you leave the room. It could be something that is exactly the same as a religion, religion has exactly the same. So therefore, even if we accept government's characterization, take government at their own higher burden, this is likely to be a pretty rationalist ritual, then you're probably not going to be perceived as crazier than any other religions. I don't understand then why you won't be able to do anything when you are at the very worst perceived with the same disregard as any other religion. What we do here is come in and explain to you, regardless of the way you are perceived, the movement itself is less strong once we have that. Because note that what it does is saying that there are things in this world that are stronger than us. It is acknowledging that there are some things that are inevitable. And for as long as humanity has existed, we have been powerless against this entity, whether it is the dark, whether it is the sun, whether it is happiness, whether it is that the waves come in. I forgot what the words for this are in English, right? What that means is that acknowledging that it has always been, and also setting aside a time to dedicate time to acknowledging that, means that that is worthy of respect from you. It is worthy of acknowledgement, and it is worthy of saying that this is something that is likely to continue. This is how it always has been. This is how it must be. What that means is that you accept human weakness, right? Because you have this concept of something is inevitable. Something is stronger than humanity is. You are therefore more accepting of the fact that humans are less capable in the face of these specific sciencey things, right? What this means is that you accept that human nature is less rational or is more stagnant and has not been able to evolve to combat to these things. And given that what rationalist movements, did you take OG?
Yeah.
I'll take CEG. CG?
The problem within this debate is for the entire case of closing opposition to stand, you need to provide a likelihood analysis as to why these individuals are going to behave the way they have. It's probably too late to do this at this point.
No, you're going to behave the way you have because this is how the movement has existed and this is how people have been behaving. The movement has been acting towards trying to change things that we have previously been told are unchanging and unchangeable, and trying to attack the things that we have been told as a people, as a human species, that we are never going to be able to tackle. Once you take this away and you tell people that this is hard or this is super fucking unlikely because this entity has more power than you, and you as a human are powerless against it to the point where you are putting away time to respect the amount of power it has against you, you are less likely to be able to strive to change it. You are less likely because you think it is less possible versus the entire rationalist philosophy that rests on it being possible to change things, to change the world and the way it works. At the moment at which rationalists no longer believe that you are to the same level that you're able to change the world, then the rationalist movement loses its heart. For all of these reasons, the rationalist movement really addresses this.
I'd like to thank the opposition whip for that speech, and indeed thank everybody for what was an incredible debate. Shake virtual hands. Do we have a breakout room, or do we adjudicate in here? Does anyone know?